Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance. Just days after securing a Senate seat for Georgia, Democrats have lost a crucial member of their party. Arizona's Senator Kyrsten Sinema says that she'll be turning her back on the broken partisan system in Washington and has walked away from the Democratic Party. NTD's Melina Wisecup has the story.
First-term Senator Kyrsten Sinema says she's declaring her independence from what she calls a broken partisan system in Washington. The Arizona Democrat is now registered as an Arizona independent. She first broke the news on Twitter with this video explaining to her constituents why she made this decision. Here's a look.
I promised that I would always do what is right for the people of Arizona. And that's what I've done. Registering as an independent and showing up to work with the title of independent is a reflection of who I've always been. And it's a reflection of who Arizona is.
And in Arizona, there are a large number of voters who are not registered in either party. As a matter of fact, there are more Arizona voters who are registered in the bracket of other than there are who are registered Democrats. So according to the latest data, there are about 1.4 million voters registered as other, while 1.2 million are registered as Democrats. That's along with 1.4 million registered Republicans. Now, some say they do believe that Senator Sinema made this decision in order to avoid a primary challenge in 2024 when she's up for re-election. And the timing of this party switch is quite notable because it comes just days after Democrats secured a 51-seat majority in the Senate after Senator Warnock's win down in Georgia. But this decision is highly unlikely to change the balance of power in the Senate. Senator Schumer this afternoon commented on Senator Sinema's decision here, saying that he was informed ahead of time and that he approves for her to keep the committee assignments that she already has. And the White House also responded saying that they don't believe it will impact their relationship with Senator Sinema. Sinema will now make the third independent senator in the upper chamber. The other two are Bernie Sanders and Angus King, both of which caucus with Democrats. Sinema has also voted with Democrats over the past couple of years since she's been in office, but she's not afraid to buck the party. And she displayed this many times, for example, when she opposed ending the filibuster, which is a rule that requires Democrats now to work with Republicans in order to get the 60 votes needed to pass most legislation. She was also one of the holdout votes that delayed the passing of Biden's Build Back Better bill. She's also been a strong advocate for immigration reform. So multiple times she's unveiled bills meant to reform immigration laws. Just recently, she partnered with Senator Tillis on a bipartisan immigration plan that would provide a pathway to citizenship for DACA recipients, also known as Dreamers, while also providing more money for border security. So she says she will continue to vote the same way she always has and will continue to walk this middle line. But she says she does feel better now being able to show up to work without being tied to the name Democrat. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
The House yesterday passing the annual National Defense Authorization Act, otherwise known as NDAA, for this fiscal year. It's worth $858 billion, but there's a lot packed into the bill other than national defense. Joining us to discuss this new bill, we have Cesar Ibarra, Vice President of Policy at FreedomWorks. Cesar Ibarra, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, great to be on.
Cesar, the NDAA has just passed through the House the annual defense spending bill worth about $858 billion. In your assessment, was this enough to satisfy our defense needs?
Yes, well, here's the thing. Obviously, we want a strong military. We want to employ a policy of peace through strength. I think all Republicans are for that. But the big problem here is that this is a massive legislation, and it also includes a lot of things that gave a lot of Republicans heartburn. For example, there were a lot of provisions inside this legislation that pretty much put forward the Green New Deal within the Department of Defense, right? Whether it's deploying, war vehicles that are, electrical, and then the DoD's car fleet to be electrical as well. Just all of these things that Republicans have been opposing in different pieces of legislation. These are the ones that made it into the massive Department of Defense legislation. I think Republicans also expressed concern over the vaccine mandate repeal. And why did they express concern? Because the legislation simply said that the Department of Defense is required to rescind the memo that authorizes the vaccine mandate on service members. However, it doesn't have any assurance. It gives us no assurances that DOD will not do that again, right? So it simply says get rid of it, but nothing that says you cannot do this again. And we've known from the COVID hysteria that these federal politicians always flip-flop on when we don't need these vaccine mandates. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't a perfect bill, but we'll see if it gets through the Senate and onto the president's desk.
Yeah, there were surely a lot of interesting things packed in there, especially initially. To your point, there was another measure tethered to the bill, the JCPA. A lot of these things typically go unnoticed to the vast majority of our country. If you could break this down for us, how a measure related to journalism and the media could be tethered to a defense bill.
Yeah, so this is Congress at its worst, right? So what Congress, there's always two pieces of legislation that are considered must pass in every fiscal year. One is the appropriations bill, which is currently being debated, and the other one is the NDA, the National Defense Authorization Act. These are must pass bills, and what these politicians try to do is they try to tack their pet projects into these bills because that's why they're called riders, right? Because they ride on the coats of these must-pass bills. So the JCPA was, it was a bill that was not germane to the legislation that dealt with, journalism and sort of how that industry operates, right? But again, what does journalism and competition and journalism have to do with our national defense? It has nothing to do with it. And again, this is another prime example of everything that is wrong with the current Congress. We need to get rid of these must-pass bills, and we need to go back to single subject legislation. If we're going to consider a defense bill, let's only consider defense. If we're going to consider journalism policy, let's deal with that separately. But we have to get rid of these must-pass bills because a lot of bad things happen there, and again, these politicians always try to get points with these bills. So we have to get rid of this practice as soon as possible.
So drilling it down even further, when it comes to the JCPA, there were quite a few concerns raised over this bill standing alone, or this rider, if you will, especially when it comes to China.
Yeah. Again, so there are no protections on how this bill would sort of, there were no protections in this bill that would have given China an upper hand with this legislation. Again, but here's the broader point that I want to get to with this JCPA. If we're going to consider JCPA, let's have a hearing, let's have a markup, let this legislation go through the legislative process. If there are concerns over how this bill deals with China, we need to have those debates and these concerns addressed in committee hearings with stakeholders having input, not a bill that is that not plugging in these policies in the middle of the night and have them considered the morning after. So that's what I would say. It's these pieces of legislation need to be addressed on their own, right, and in committee hearings where people have a chance to have their input and voice heard.
And before I let you go, I mean, how much leverage or influence do special interest groups in Washington, lobbyists, have over some of these critical bills like the NDAA?
Oh, a lot, right? Well, you look at the defense community, right? All of the defense titans in America, they are big donors to Democrats and Republicans. You look at the National Association of Broadcasters, they are, they were one of the big pushers of the JCPA. They were also big donors to a lot of these politicians. So yeah, just follow the money and look at how they're trying to pass legislation, and you're going to see a lot of correlation with congressional priorities and how much money these special interest groups pour on the legislative process.
Cesar Ibarra, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The man at the center of the tremendous collapse of the cryptocurrency exchange FTX has agreed to testify before the Senate Banking Committee next week. FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried said on Twitter today that he would try to help lawmakers understand what led to the crash, as well as his own failings. Several members of Congress had demanded his testimony. FTX marketed itself as a beginner-friendly way to get involved in digital assets. It was one of the biggest crypto exchanges in the world until last month, when it faced a sudden wave of customer withdrawals it could not handle. There were billions of dollars in losses, and with investors filing lawsuits, FTX and sister hedge fund Alameda both filed for bankruptcy. The Biden administration is sanctioning 2 Chinese companies. This is over their alleged human rights abuses and illegal fishing activities. One of the companies is Pingtan Marine Enterprises, listed on the NASDAQ stock exchange. The other, Dalian Ocean Fishing. Both receive annual subsidies from the Chinese Communist regime. The Treasury Department says the company's ships were found to have illegally carried thousands of shark carcasses, including from endangered species. Crew members on board reported physical violence, forced labor, and sometimes no pay. With the sanctions in place, the company's assets in the U.S. have been frozen, and Americans are barred from doing business with them. The Treasury Department condemned the 2 companies' practices, saying they, quote, undermine fundamental labor and environmental standards, end quote. The Congressional Workers Union and other groups are asking Congress for overtime pay and protection. They say their proposed bill needs to pass before the Congress changes in January. For staffers working on the Hill, finishing legislation before the new year often means putting in overtime. According to a survey from the Congressional Progressive Staff Association, 60% said they worked more than 50 hours per week. The staff groups are now asking the House to pass a resolution that would give aides overtime protection, including time and a half for overtime hours. Letters asking for congressional reform went out to current Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. The first Gen Z elected congressman had his application for a Washington, D.C. apartment denied. Community organizer Maxwell Alejandro Frost ran on issues like police reform and abolishing the death penalty. He beat out his Republican opponent in Florida's blue 10th congressional district. But when Frost applied for an apartment in D.C., his less than favorable credit report got in the way. Frost says he ran up debt running for Congress and that working for Uber was not enough to cover the cost of living. Frost tweeted out saying that he told that's the reason for his poor credit and that he was told it would be fine, but his apartment application was ultimately denied and he lost his application fee. Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.